From the Toronto studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Zahra Syed. Our top story tonight. The World Health Organization has documented a concerning surge in attacks on healthcare facilities in the occupied Palestinian territory. Between October 7th and October 24th, a total of 171 attacks have been reported. According to the WHO office in the occupied Palestinian territory, these attacks have resulted in the loss of 493 lives, including 16 healthcare workers who were on duty. The organization issued a strong appeal, emphasizing the urgent need to protect both healthcare facilities and civilians in the region. The data reveals that 96 of these attacks occurred in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, while 75 took place in the Gaza Strip. Most casualties, numbering 491, were reported in the Gaza Strip, with one tragic incident being an Israeli airstrike on the Al Ahli Baptist Hospital. In addition to the loss of life, 387 people have been injured and 34 healthcare facilities have been affected by these attacks. The situation in Gaza has been dire, with its 2.3 million residents facing shortages of essential necessities such as food, water, medicine, and fuel. The family of a prominent AlJazeera journalist in Gaza has been killed by an Israeli airstrike, while AlJazeera's Gaza bureau chief received devastating news while reporting live. His wife, son, daughter, and grandson were killed in an Israeli airstrike on their home in Nuseirat camp, where they had sought refuge. Al-Dahdu had been reporting on the airstrikes for weeks. He condemned what he called targeted attacks on children, women, and civilians. AlJazeera strongly condemned the killing of Al-Dahdu's family, referring to the indiscriminate attacks by Israeli forces. The attack comes amid rising tensions and a critical review of the channel's reporting. This incident increases the number of journalists affected by the ongoing conflict. According to the Committee to Protect Journalists, at least 24 journalists have lost their lives, including 20 Palestinians, 3 Israelis, and 1 Lebanese journalist. 8 journalists were injured and 3 are missing or detained. According to the Palestinian Ministry of Information, 47 journalists were killed by Israeli forces from 2000 until the start of the latest conflict on October 7th. UN Security Council members continue to struggle to pass a resolution on the Israel-Hamas conflict that could lead to a ceasefire. The UN Security Council voted down 2 competing resolutions related to the latest violence between the two parties. This comes after Israel demanded the resignation of the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres for his comments that it claims were anti-Israel and justified terrorism. Israel is refusing visas to the United Nations representatives in retaliation for the Guterres' remarks. Far from giving in to the pressure, the United Nations Secretary General reaffirmed his stance. He continues to call for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and is condemning violations of international law. Russia and China vetoed a U.S. resolution that did not call for a ceasefire. The U.S. resolution aimed to affirm Israel's right to self-defense, uphold international laws, especially regarding the protection of civilians, and advocate for humanitarian pauses to provide aid to Gaza. However, Russia and China's vetoes prevented its adoption. The Russian resolution, calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and condemning Hamas's attacks on Israel and indiscriminate attacks in Gaza, also failed to secure enough votes for adoption. After the votes, Malta's UN ambassador Vanessa Fraser, speaking on behalf of the 10 non-permanent members of the council, announced they will be working on a new proposal in the coming days. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said Wednesday that Hamas is a liberation group fighting to protect the Palestinian territories, not a terrorist organization. He also announced the cancellation of his upcoming trip to Israel. In a speech to lawmakers from his ruling AK party, Erdogan accused Israel of targeting civilians in Gaza and killing large numbers of children, women, and the elderly. He called for an immediate ceasefire and negotiations on the release of Israeli prisoners. He called on Muslim countries to work together to secure lasting peace in the region. Erdogan also criticized Western powers for what he called their unlimited support for Israel, which led to the massacres in Gaza. The Turkish president also reiterated Turkey's proposal for a guarantee system to resolve the conflict. He said Turkey is ready to be one of the guarantors for the Palestinian side with a humanitarian, political, and military presence. Two leading global media groups have rejected Israel's claims that Palestinian rockets were responsible for the attack on a hospital in Gaza last week. The New York Times and the BBC, which reviewed evidence related to the October 17th explosion at Al-Ahli Hospital in Gaza, rejected the Israeli claim. The attack on the hospital had killed at least 500 people, mostly children. Israeli and U.S. officials claim it was an errant Palestinian rocket that malfunctioned in the sky, fell to the ground, and hit the hospital. But the New York Times reports in its investigation that video footage shown by Israeli and U.S. authorities shows otherwise. The missile seen in the video is most likely not the cause for explosion at the hospital, since it detonated about 2 miles in the sky. The Times also said Hamas has not produced any remnant of an Israeli munition or any physical evidence to support its claim that Israel was responsible. Using satellite imagery to triangulate the firing location in these videos, the New York Times determined that the projectile was fired from near the Israeli town of Nahal Oz in the direction of Gaza. BBC News reached a similar conclusion. Experts interviewed by National Public Radio also concluded that the visual evidence did not support a normal Israeli airstrike. A Muslim teenager was targeted and assaulted on the New York City subway, prompting a hate crime investigation by the police. The 16-year-old Muslim girl was on her way to school on a southbound 5 train approaching Union Square around 9 a.m. local time. A man seated next to her verbally abused her, calling her a terrorist and forcibly tugging on her hijab. Another female passenger intervened, causing the assailant to flee. The police are actively searching for the suspect, but no arrests have been made. This incident comes amid an increase in hate crimes in the city following the conflict between Israel and Hamas. A Jewish woman was also assaulted on the subway in Midtown Manhattan on October 14th, with the attacker targeting her because she was Jewish. The NYPD reported 161 anti-Jewish motivated complaints in 2023 prior to the current Israel-Hamas attack, and an additional 35 complaints have been reported since then. Similarly, anti-Muslim motivated complaints have surged, with 7 incidents before October 8th and an additional 5 in the last 3 weeks. Organizations like the Council on American-Islamic Relations have noted a significant increase in requests for assistance and first-hand accounts of rising Islamophobia in the city. In related news, the Council on American-Islamic Relations, or CAIR, says it has received the largest wave of complaints of discriminatory incidents since the Hamas attack on Israel. In a statement, CAIR said it had received 774 complaints since October 7th. It says this is the largest wave of complaints since December of 2015, when Donald Trump had called for a ban on Muslims entering the United States. CAIR's Director of Research and Advocacy, Corey Saylor, said anyone with a conscience should be deeply concerned about the sudden surge in complaints. He urged authorities to do everything in their power to prevent the wave of hatred sweeping the nation from getting out of control. Governor Desantis bans pro-Palestinian student groups. Details come after the break. Stay tuned and we'll be right back. Welcome back. Florida's Governor Ron DeSantis and the state's university system have banned a pro-Palestinian student organization from university campuses. The state university system of Florida said Tuesday it was disbanding the Students for Justice in Palestine chapter because of the group's support of Hamas. The University of Florida's SJP chapter says Governor DeSantis continues to disregard American values, such as free speech, in order to expand his political power. It adds that such a bending of the law is the greatest disrespect, not only to any pro-Palestinian organization, but also to anyone who truly committed to the political freedom and free speech. DeSantis, who has announced his candidacy for the 2024 U.S. presidential race, has taken a hard line on Palestinians. He suggests that the U.S. should not accept Palestinian refugees fleeing Gaza. Muslim communities in the US have recently expressed concern about Islamophobic, anti-Palestinian rhetoric in the country following Hamas's attacks on Israel on October 7th. Israeli airstrikes have forced 70% of Gaza's population to flee their homes as living conditions have become unbearable. According to the government media office in Gaza, more than 181,000 houses were damaged in Israeli airstrikes in the Gaza Strip. Gaza government spokesperson Salama Maroof said more than 20,000 homes were destroyed or rendered uninhabitable by the Israeli offensive. He notes that 72 government buildings and dozens of public and service facilities have also been damaged, including 32 mosques, 177 schools, and 3 churches. Maroof says displaced civilians took shelter in 223 locations, including hospitals, schools, churches, and health centers. Officials in Uzbekistan's capital, Tashkent, have reportedly closed nearly a dozen restaurants that do not serve alcohol. Restaurant owners say they were told their businesses could reopen if they agreed to sell liquor. This is one of the recent measures that have raised concerns about religious freedom for Muslims in Uzbekistan. The government appears to be addressing what it claims is a growing wave of religious radicalization in the country. Several restaurant owners who operate halal establishments revealed their businesses were unexpectedly shut down this month. This was after surprise inspections by various authorities. New Zealand has begun an inquest into the 2019 Christchurch mosque attacks by an Australian white supremacist that killed 51 people. The proceedings are expected to span 6 weeks. They aim to uncover the details of the events and explore measures to prevent similar incidents. The attacks on March 15, 2019 were New Zealand's deadliest mass shooting. They were perpetrated by Australian white supremacist Brenton Tarrant, who is now serving a life sentence. The inquest will investigate various aspects of the mass murder, including emergency response, possible assistance to the gunmen, and the causes of death of the victims. The inquiry began this week with a traditional Maori welcome, Quran reading, and a tribute video to the victims. The proceedings featured a video showing the attackers' movements on the day of the incident, recorded with a GoPro camera. New Zealand's government, led by then Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, took swift action after the attacks. It tightened gun laws and urged social media companies to combat online extremism. A prior Royal Commission of Inquiry revealed that intelligence services were focused on Islamist extremist threats, which distracted from far-right threats. Ardern has publicly apologized for the government's shortcomings and acknowledged its mistakes. A gunman killed 18 people and injured 13 in a mass shooting at a bowling alley and bar in Lewiston, Maine. The suspect, Robert Card, is still at large. He is a U.S. Army firearms instructor. Card's vehicle was found abandoned near a boat dock in Lisbon, 7 miles southeast of Lewiston. Police say the shootings occurred at around 7 p.m. local time Wednesday at Shmenji's Bar and Grill and Spare Time Recreation, a bowling alley about 4 miles apart. The city is on lockdown as authorities launch a manhunt for the armed and dangerous suspect. It is one of the deadliest mass shootings this year. The attack has prompted calls for stricter gun control measures in the state. Maine Governor Janet Mills has urged residents to follow law enforcement instructions as the situation unfolds. The U.S. has had at least 565 mass shootings so far this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive. That is an average of almost 2 mass shootings a day. That's all from our Toronto studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell icon for the latest updates. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.